Good afternoon. So another midweek show, and this week is a brilliant topic actually because we're going to be discussing, is Fife's property market a buyer's or seller's market? Now, before we show graphs and get into it, let's cue the VT. I'm just looking at this and I feel like I can't believe we're into March already. I feel like we only just did this last year.
I know, it comes around so quickly.
It has, it's come around really quick, but it is a brilliant topic because if you are considering selling, if you're already on the market perhaps, or if you are buying, or if you just have a genuine interest in
Yeah.
obviously Fife property market, it's a brilliant topic. And as always, we're going to support it with statistics, figures. We've got a graph, and Richard, I know you love a graph. So we can have a great chat. But are you then, on the back of that, a Fife homeowner that's considering a move in the next kind of 6 to 12 months? Perhaps you're a buy-to-let landlord, weighing up whether you expand your portfolio or kind of streamline your portfolio.
Yeah.
Or are you a first-time buyer as well, considering, getting onto the market, and is now the right time to take the plunge?
Mm-hmm.
That is the ultimate question as well. But whatever your position, knowing whether the Fife market is currently favouring buyers or sellers or balanced will help you make those informed decisions. And that's what we always say, get your ducks in a row and make informed decisions. For those that perhaps watch the regular kind of Fife property market updates, obviously we do them live every Monday at 10 o'clock. You'll know that that's the best way to measure whether we're in a buyer's, balanced, or seller's market. Now, it is just kind of like a brief run through of the previous weeks, and we always do say 1 week doesn't make a trend. But like this week's that I just did, we're able to do the all of February statistics. I then reminded you of January's as well, so you can see that what's coming to market is increasing, but that is still active buyers. So that is a good one to watch on a Monday. But with this one, we're going to drill down a wee bit more. And it helps us analyse the proportion of properties marketed as sold, subject to concluded missives or under offer, compared to the total number of properties on the market. So
Yeah.
what do those numbers kind of look like, Richard? What is that?
Yeah, I'm going to run through there. I'll give you a wee bit of an example just to kind of try and explain it a bit better, and then we'll look at what bracket kind of represents an extreme buyer's market right up to like the extreme seller's market. But it's true what you say there, and you do your weekly updates, and as you say, it's just a general roundup of how things have gone in that week in the property market in Fife. But it's, if you keep up with them, and if you've got this that roundup each week, you start to see the trends and how influencing things can be on the property market in terms of the amount of properties available for sale and just those trends are quite important, especially when you're involved in the property market, or you're thinking about getting your property onto the market. So they are really important. So they're great roundups that you do weekly, Sophie. So you can catch them on Monday 10 or 10:30. Do you do them?
Monday live at 10 o'clock, or you can watch the rerun. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can catch all of them on the reruns on our pages and on the YouTube channel as well. So yeah, let's look at the numbers then and where this works out. So for instance, if we have say there's 300 properties on the market in Fife, of which 100 of these properties are sold, subject to conclusion of missives or under offer, and 200 are still available on the market. That 100 as a percentage of the 300 total is basically a third. It's 33.3%. So that's what that equates to. Okay, so this percentage figure acts as like the barometer for market conditions and can be analysed using this kind of table, as I'm going to go through just now. So we'll start at an extreme buyer's market. Okay, so if we're looking at between 0 and 20%, okay, that is an extreme buyer's market, and that percentage falls in that bracket, okay. A buyer's market, as they call it, is between the 21 and 29%, okay. And then when the market is balanced between buyers and sellers, which they call a balanced market, ironically enough, it's between 30% and 40%, okay. Then we head into the other side where it starts to become a seller's market. A seller's market is between 41% and 49%, okay. And as things start to get improve and become in favour of sellers, it becomes a hot seller's market, and that's between 50 and 59%, okay. And we're going to bring the graph in a little bit later. It clearly demonstrates the next one, which is an extreme seller's market, which is 60% and more, okay. And that was like times just post-COVID and lockdown and things, where we shot up to, over 70 and 70, 72, 71%, which we'll speak about just in a second. That's an extreme seller's market, which was a really busy time in the market. And you don't really get any busier than what it was just post COVID and the pandemic. So that's basically how that percentage barometer works. And then when it's at that each level, where it falls into either an extreme buyer's market, an extreme seller's market, or we could be in the middle and be at a balanced market.
Perfect. It's good to see it broken down that way, and then we'll be able to give context to it as well as we kind of go throughout. Because so how does Fife compare in terms of that then?
So Fife, the Fife area on individually, if you look at the historical data from the website, the advisory, which has tracked this metric for years, you could observe some key trends, and it lands each February. So we've picked the perfect time to do this, because we've just left February 2025. We're into March, as you say. Surprisingly enough, here we are in March already. And for this exercise, we're going to look at Fife, and that is KY1 to KY12, and then KY14 to KY16. Okay, these are the postcodes that cover the Fife area. Now, in the years before the pandemic, we're looking at 2018, 2019, 2020. The Fife market hovered between like 41% and 48%. Now, remember, the pandemic didn't really kick in and start till March 2020, okay? So then demand really rebounded post-pandemic, and very sharply as well, in the summer of 2020, and continuing into like 2021 and 2022, because it kind of spanned about nearly a 2-year period where this this increase and that really extreme market, extreme sellers market, was where we were sat at. In February 2021, the percentage had risen to 65%, and then in February 2022, it was up to 71%. I say that obviously, and I know it's on the graph anyway, because we're going to look at it, but jumping up to 71% post-pandemic is a real extreme sellers market. Absolutely. And it's very rare to find us in that situation, but obviously the climate at the time obviously influencing the market put us in that position. However, with the fallout from like the Liz Truss and a quasi-budget in late 2022, by the time we got to February 2023, it settled down to about 50%. And then by February 2024, the figure had softened slightly to about 46%. So, which still has us in a seller's market at that point, but a lot less extreme than the hot sellers and the extreme sellers market. And now we're in 2025, just left February 2025, we see the figure sitting at 48%, which again is still very much a seller's market.
It is, and it's borderline nearly hitting the hot sellers market as well. So it's interesting.
It's close there, but that's what I'm saying, very much so still in a seller's market. So let's look at the graph, because obviously I could go through figures and things as well, and it's not always easy to follow. So visually, it's good to have the graphs, and as you say, I do like a graph. So hopefully you could all see that clear enough. And this represents the Fife area, and demonstrating whether it's a buyer's or a seller's property market. Now, the yellow bars here that run along represent each year, going back to pre-pandemic 2018, right up to February, where we've just left 2025. Okay. And as I explained there, the first column, 2018, we were at 41%, 2019, 48%, 2020, 46%. This was all pre-pandemic. 2021, post-pandemic, jumped up, obviously, demand. Obviously, there's a lot more property, demand for property was a lot more. It's obviously become a real extreme sellers market at 65%. And that continued right into 2022, where you can see it jumped up to 71%. And then 2023, where the Liz Truss, the budget and things come in, brought things back down 50%, and it's gradually kind of, as we say, probably the good word for it is softened. I would say leveled out a little, back down to 46%, and we're now sitting 48%, and it's a seller's market at that 48% point. I think that's probably a clearer representation of the numbers, and you can see that trend where it was lower post-pandemic, jumped up just at the pre-pandemic, jumped up just post-pandemic, and then we've started to level out again, but still very much in a seller's market. Sorry, Sophie, I just
did you just
took you out here, take my graph off. You're back again.
You're back in the room.
Yeah, so those kind of obviously like a wee bit historic trend on how we've come through a buyer's and into a seller's market, and in the middle hit a really extreme seller's market throughout the last few years, pre and then post pandemic. So where we are now and looking at those figures and that trend, what kind of implications does that have for the Fife property market for the year ahead in 2025?
Great question. Absolutely. And something I'm sure everybody's keen to know. So we'll break it down. So we're going to start with for sellers. So for sellers, we're now in a Fife property market where patience and strategy are absolutely essential. Buyers have more choice, as we've spoken about in those many updates that we do and the other shows out with that. That means then that sellers must focus on pricing realistically to ensure that their home stands out. We could say it until we're blue in the face. We need to be at a realistic price that is attractive to get people through the door. We need to be able to get people through the door so that then we can start negotiations. But if people aren't even clicking onto your listing, if people aren't even attracted to the property and I can't even get them through the door, I have nobody to negotiate with. And that's where we're experts, is our negotiation skills. And that's what gets the results that we have. But we need to be realistic with the pricing to get them through the door in the first place and make your property stand out. So overpricing will lead to an extended time on the market, which then it seriously cuts down your chances of both selling and actually eventually getting the sale to complete. And again, we've done
through to completion and money actually exchanging and keys changing hands. Yeah.
Correct. Not just sitting, yep, we've got an offer and then actually it falls through, because we've done a show about that before, about how high the percentage of, if you're on the market for over 100 days, then what's your chances of actually that concluding? And it's scary figures and something that people don't take into account. So that being said, though, it is being well presented and being that appropriately priced Fife home, it continues to attract that solid interest. You've got mortgage rates stabilizing, which has then created confidence among buyers, but they are taking the time to make decisions. I mean, quite rightly so, it's your biggest asset. So it's not something to also do, on a rash decision. They are, it's all about a proactive marketing approach, including the virtual tours, the personal property tours that we do, strong professional photography. If it's an area that has got beautiful surroundings, has it got countryside view? Has it got seaside view? Are we doing aerial photography? Are we doing, obviously, the drone footage? Are we doing the digital markers? What is the digital exposure of that as well? Because that is all key to securing a sale in a reasonable time frame.
That's you make a really good point there. And as you're talking about, obviously, you're talking about the realistic pricing from the outset. And we have covered it previously, but obviously, again, because it's so important, that initial meeting and appointment with people, being prepared, being able to show them the evidence of how you've reached your price point and your recommendations for valuation, and being realistic about that from the outset. Then, depending on what area you're in. Do you know, whether are you in the East Neuk, or are you further inland? Are you, are you along in St Andrews, or are you, depending on where you are, thinking about that area and thinking, right, okay, let's find the right marketing strategy to implement here. We'll definitely get the drone in to pick up the seaside, or and all these things, and then what to talk about in the surrounding area in your talk up video when you do your property tour. And that all goes hand in hand, as well as, like you said, strong photography and descriptions. They have their place, but the digital side of things is so important, and that all goes hand in hand with setting all that out really from the outset at that appointment. I mean, let's just obviously expand on it a wee bit, but how important is that, Sophie, for you to be able to then get that property sold, get the best result for the seller, but also have a happy buyer as well, and have it all round? Yeah,
absolutely, because ultimately that is what we're here for. Yes, we are to obviously get your property sold, but you're normally selling for a reason, and we're here to solve that problem. So there's absolutely no problem me completely over fluffing and really exaggerating just to win the listing, just to win the listing, to get a board up, because then what good is that? It doesn't help the seller. I don't even get a buyer, and then it's not good for us either. So we need to be realistic. But we just had one, for example, Pickford Crescent in Cellardyke. The pre-portal went up on a Thursday afternoon. Friday, I woke up to an email with a verbal offer. The person hadn't even stepped foot into the property.
But they probably felt like they had. Yeah.
Exactly. They'd watched that. They know what our pre-portals are like. They know it means you need to act fast and come on with a strong offer. Friday, they obviously, put the offer in. Property sold in 4 days. Just by the seller couldn't believe it. The seller was like, "I've not even seen my photography yet, and you've got me an offer."
I've not even seen the pictures and it's sold. But then that's a great example and demonstrating how effective the marketing strategy can be if it's done correctly.
Absolutely. And then that buyer, as you've touched on, making the buyer happy, absolutely delighted. Pickford Crescent is a sought after area,
and they'll be ecstatic because they've got in there quickly because they've picked up on the
correct. So no, that's a brilliant example, and obviously that's only just recent, and it's because I did it on the update, and I was like, I know you've probably only just realised I've spoke about this as a coming soon, but it's actually now sold.
Coming soon and then straight to sold, yeah.
Yeah, so and that's just one of our examples of where our digital marketing and our exposure and our expertise gets the results for sellers and buyers alike.
Just to touch on the pricing again, I mean, I see it quite often where properties will come onto the market, and you will as well, of course. And you'll straight away sometimes like that's a wee bit overpriced, or sometimes way overpriced for the market, and you'll see it will sit, and then eventually it'll be reduced. As opposed to sometimes a price realignment. There's a big difference in price reduction and price realignment. And I always feel for that seller, they'll have been given a false representation of what their property value is. Then they have that expectation, and then their expectations is then going to be slashed right down because a few weeks in, there's nobody coming in. It's not getting picked up in the correct search criteria or group, and they're having to take then a hit on what their expectation of what they were going to achieve for it in the first place, when really it wasn't actually realistic. You should start at the realistic price point, and when you get that, then negotiate up with, when you get that, when you've got several interested parties, that's where you do that extra, and that's the added value of an agent who knows what they're doing. You're paying for their negotiation skills, and being able to achieve you the best price while also having a happy buyer as well.
Absolutely. And then on the back of that, that's right, and you touched on it as well, like doing your homework and where we got that figure from. Don't be afraid to interview your agent. If you're getting a couple of agents out, interview them, have questions prepared to ask them, and get them to back up what they're saying. Where did they get that figure from? What are they achieving in their area? What's their average, offers over price? What exposure have they got? Quiz them. As I've said, it's your biggest asset, and you are entrusting that expert to help you with your journey. So have questions, and don't be afraid to ask them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and then that's things from, like, obviously you see a seller's perspective, but then obviously we're talking about buyers. So what about buyers in Fife and things? What could you know, what's the implications in the Fife market for them for the year ahead?
Yeah, so if you're in the market for, purchasing property in 2025 in Fife, then
Mhm.
you'll find that you'll have a little bit more breathing space compared to the frenzied activity of 2021/2022.
Yeah,
While desirable properties still attract competition, there are opportunities to negotiate on price and secure favorable terms, whether that be fixtures, fittings, furnishings, entry dates, etc.
yeah,
Particularly on homes that have been on the market for a while. But we cannot stress enough the importance, and we could say this till we're blue in the face. Get your ducks in a row, make sure you are organized, and if you require, for example, a mortgage, what steps have you taken to do that? Have you even spoken to a mortgage advisor? Do we need to refer you to one? Do you have your mortgage in principle? Or if you have a property to sell, what steps have you taken to, because yes, you might be a buyer, but you could be a seller as well. So what steps have you taken to get yourself attractive? So it's all about strengthening your position, because that offer, yes, your offer is an attractive offer, but also a big part to play in your offer is your positioning, and also what are you doing to look like a serious buyer?
you
Um,
know, a buyer's
yeah.
position, a
Oh
buyer's
yeah.
position, yeah, a buyer's position again. That if your agent, do you know that's something like you're saying, quiz your agent. Do you know, ask your agent what questions will you be asking potential buyers to qualify them to make sure they're in a position to actually put an offer on and follow through on that offer on my property. Because like you're saying, I mean, if you're not qualifying buyers properly, they could not have their mortgage in principle, not even spoke to a mortgage advisor. Do you know, they might not have the proper funds in place. Do you know, all these things that you say really should be in place before you actually start looking into putting offers. And if people are putting offers on properties without all this in place, it'll end up falling through. And then again, you've got a disappointed seller because they thought they had the
Mhm.
sale. Do you know,
Mhm.
so it's the agent's job to make sure they are qualifying buyers correctly before they even view the property. Never
Yeah.
mind get to the stage of putting an offer in.
Mhm.
That's a really important thing.
And something we've come across, and even just recently, it's amazing. And it's probably just because you're not in the industry, so you maybe aren't aware of the terminology and everything.
Yeah,
But how people think that they have a property to sell, but they don't have a mortgage on it. So actually, when they sell it, they're cash buyers. So I'm a cash buyer. And actually, no, you're not. You've got a property to sell. You're not a cash buyer. But
yeah,
everybody thinks if they're in that position, they're a cash buyer. And you might think in theory you are, but you have a property to sell, and that's the long and short of it. That's something that we come across regularly, and
yeah.
again, that's why.
It's an easy misconception, and people do fall foul. In essence, they are a cash buyer because they don't require a
Have a more.
mortgage, but you
Yes,
still have to conclude on a sale on your property to be able to buy. So you're
yeah,
still in that chain. Do you know, a cash buyer's where, do you know, if you're lucky enough, you've got the cash in the bank and the money in
yes.
the bank to be able to that's a true cash buyer. You can be a cash buyer, but you require the sale of your property to go through.
Absolutely. So no, position is key, but
Mm.
then it's also, if, for example, you're looking at your next property and you're not seeing something that does tick all your boxes, then consider broadening your search slightly. Um, Sometimes the kind of best value and best properties that you may be completely unaware of can be found just outside your kind of sought after locations. And especially when you take into account you've got the new government settling in, and you've got wider economic factors at play, and there's so much more to consider when you are looking to buy or sell in Fife this year. But the key out of this is the property market remains resilient, but expectations need to be adjusted to this more stable, normal,
Yeah.
inverted commas, but normal environment.
Yeah, I think you see that. I was like, because we were saying obviously it's the market has softened as we were saying, but I like to say obviously it's leveled out a bit. We're still in this, it's
Mhm.
still a seller's market, but do you know, sellers have to start being a wee bit more realistic about their expectations. Do you know, we've come
Yeah.
from a really, really busy time in the market and a really extreme seller's market. which we won't probably see for a while again. Obviously, the pandemic and that had a lot to do with that. But yeah, just being that realistic. I mean, do you know, when you say about broadening your search area and even your search criteria, people could be quite, do you know, they could get the blinkers on, like, I'm looking for a 3-bedroom, detached, this, that, do you know, all that. And it's like if you watch do you know, if you watch Kirsty and Phil on telly and things, do you know, if you watch how they do that, people have this vision of what they want in their head and where they want it. And what they'll do is they'll go through that whole process with them and make them understand, right, okay, we'll compromise here. And if you actually just come a few miles down the road, you'll actually get closer to what you want. And it's actually not as expensive. A good example of that is in the East Nuke and areas that you cover, Sophie. You know, people might think like Anstruther and Cellar-Dyke and things. And that's a really popular area. You know, house prices are higher. If you come back along the road slightly into St Monans, and I know house prices have crept up in St Monans over the last few years, but the price point is a lot more attractive, and you're still on the same coastline. You're literally 2 miles along the road. And then people actually think, oh well, actually, do you know, I could get near enough what I want here for less of the price, and I'm still in the same area technically. You've still got all the benefits of being in the East Nuke. So that's a good example, and that'll happen, do you know, all over Fife and indeed all over the country, if you just open up your mind to kind of consider a slight alternative, and like you say, just kind of pushing that that vision a wee bit different from what you've originally thought about, without compromising on what you want.
Yeah, of course. You've got to have some non-negotiables, but there is also things, and maybe have a bit of maybe it's having an eye for something, but also be open to suggestions. So maybe right off the bat, it doesn't have X, Y, or Z, but actually, does it have the potential to have that? Could you actually make that adaptation, or could that be added, or could it be taken away? Like, look at it think outside the box as well. And you never know, you might surprise yourself and find an absolute gem that you could just make your own.
Yeah, I think also for that, we mentioned at the beginning that, you know, buyers and sellers can also be landlords, investors who are building portfolios, or like you said, maybe trying to streamline it, or, you know, so they've got a lot to consider as well. And big factors in that obviously are due lettings, and I know that area is a big one. And, you know, where a property is positioned, and, you know, the seller's expectations for a price point and things is a big factor to the landlord investor who's buying from the seller, because they are very much numbers driven to make sure that it's a viable investment. So things like obviously area and that could have a real positive effect if it's done correctly. And if you've got an agent like yourself, or indeed myself, but who has a knowledge, or has somebody who has a knowledge of investment and areas that are good for investment within Fife, and indeed throughout the country, if you're different agents throughout the country, having that knowledge of buy-to-let investment areas and where they could pick up good investments because of that location is something that you won't get unless you've got an agent who's got experience in that area over a certain amount of time, and kind of, you know, boots on the ground, knows what's going on, knows what streets, knows which properties let well, which kind of tenant demographic are looking in certain areas and things as well. So obviously I just started getting my buy-to-let and investment bit in at the end here before we wrap up, because they are still, and very much so in the current climate, are sellers and indeed buyers as well.
Definitely. I mean, you've got to get your bit in, absolutely, because we do also, absolutely. So if you are planning to move in 2025, or you are considering, if you're on the market or considering going on the market, or need to get a valuation, whatever your position may be, we're here to help. As Richard said, we're here to help. So pick up the phone, pop into one of the offices, message us, comment on this. If you're not watching live, you can do the rerun. But certainly something we can't stress enough is get your ducks in a row. If you need to make yourself a list, write a list, get your ducks in a row, and make sure that you are fully equipped and have the knowledge. And if you don't have the knowledge, how are you going about getting that knowledge? Speak to an expert, and we can certainly help you, because ultimately that's what we're here for.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing to take away from today, if you're watching, is that, you know, speak to an agent and put them to the test and make sure that they're the right agent and they have the right knowledge and expertise to help you get the right result that you want, whether you're a seller or indeed you're a buyer. Definitely it works on both sides, and ultimately our objective is to, of course, get the seller the best result, but also have a happy buyer. I think that's such an important thing.
Absolutely. Couldn't say it better myself. Yeah.
That's great.
Perfect. Well, that's another midweek show done.
Yeah.
If you've got any questions, put them in the comments. We'll come back to you.
Yeah.
But we'll see you all next week for another update. And
sure. Yeah.
all the best. Take care.
Thanks, Sophie. Bye.
Bye for now. Bye.